community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The VUU, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message. Hello, welcome to this week's episode of The VUU, Voices of Unitarian Universalism. We are so excited this week to have a show on embodiment. But before we begin, I want to wish our siblings in many faiths who celebrate the Festival of Lights, Happy Diwali. So and it's the new moon, so November 4th is an important day today. And it's my sister's birthday, so I just want to give a shout out to my younger sister, who my cousin described as Aisha times 10. So just want to put that out there. And I'm Aisha Hauser, and I'm in Seattle, Washington, and looking forward to an amazing show with Reverend Erin Walter and Reverend Lindasusan Ulrich. And I will introduce both of them after our hosts introduce themselves. Chris Rivera, how are you and where are you?
Hey, y'all. How are you? I'm Christina Rivera. I am coming to you from very sunny and beautiful Cabo Rojo, Puerto Rico, and I'm excited to be with you today. This is one of the topics that I was waiting for, so I'm really, really excited that we're here. Michael, how you doing?
Hi everyone. This is Michael Tino in Peekskill, New York. I'm okay. I'm here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. I'm trying to get our other host, Dawn Fortune, in. They are having technical difficulties, and we'll get them in, and it's okay. We'll get them into this conversation at some point. I'm a little cranky over election results, but who isn't? I'm cranky about like watching news reports that people voted this way because of mask mandates and vaccine requirements, and I'm like, because God forbid we keep each other safe. so I'm cranky. But it's nice to be with you.
Yeah, it's Chris, your state, your home state.
Whew. It was rough. It was rough.
Yeah.
It felt a lot like staying up for the presidential elections when Trump won. It was like a very deja vu sense of, I know that this is going to happen. I know that this Youngkin is gonna be elected. We could see it coming for weeks, months, really, and but you know, kind of hoping against hope. And I stayed up really late to try and see if they would call it before I went to sleep, and they didn't. So I went to sleep thinking, well, you know, maybe, and woke up, and you know, with the news that he had been elected. And you know, it's just a referendum on how desperately the South and other places in the U.S. just doesn't want to be reconciled to its history, right? And
we're talking about Virginia, just so folks.
Yes, yeah, Virginia, yeah, and you know, it was all of the campaigning was about critical race theory being taught in schools, and trans student protections in schools, and mask mandates in schools. Like you could not have a conversation about housing, about healthcare, about education. It just always came back to those topics, which made it really hard. And we also just had a terrible candidate. Like I just like how I don't know how many times do we have to put up a white man because we think that that's what's needed to win, and then lose to know that maybe if we actually go with somebody who's passionate and has really progressive thinking, that might actually do it.
Well, Seattle had a crappy mayor race, and in the primaries I supported Colleen Echohawk, who's a Native woman who had, not that I want to rule everything, but every now and then I want to sit everyone down and go, listen, we can beat this trash candidate who we know who won, Bruce Farrell won, who is corporate, Amazon, the whole thing. And we could beat him if in the primaries, everyone gets behind Colleen. There was no doubt in my mind, but no, we need to spread blah, blah. So now we have Seattle, being basically going to turn into some version of San Francisco because, the wealthy want to hold on to what they have. Dawn is here before we keep going down that rabbit hole. Dawn, how are you?
Hi. Governor Phil Murphy was reelected in New Jersey. And yes, but yeah, right, by like 6 votes. But I have a friend who works on his staff, not his campaign, but his staff, whose politics and understanding of justice things I trust deeply. And I have never seen her so enthused or devoted to a particular candidate. And this is a person who is inherently skeptical of white men. So I am inclined to be happy about Phil Murphy getting reelected. My internet connection seems to be a little iffy this morning or today. So if I wobble in and out, that's I'm going to blame it on that. Right now, I have this really amazing Technicolor pixelated view on my screen, which is kind of cool. But there we are. We're all back now. But yeah, Christina, I was thinking of you watching the results come in, and I want to echo what Aisha has said, and that is, every time we compromise, we compromise. Every time we move to the center, we move further away from what is our foundation. And I'm tired of it.
Yeah, and because it's clear that we can carry these places, right? We carried it with Obama, and because for as problematic as he and his presidency was, he still had a vision and a passion for a version of the United States that was more closely aligned with liberation, right? And more closely aligned with moving towards, what we truly could be. And he was able to communicate that, and he was able to get people fired up about it, right? And because he believed it, and because he lived it, and because he had that lived experience that people connect with, whether or not you know that that's what you're connecting with, right?
Right.
And hearing those same platforms from Terry White Guy McAuliffe, it's just not the same. Like, you're not gonna get the same reaction because that is not his lived experience. And people are gonna react with that and be influenced by that, whether or not they know it. And so we now have this, and we have, a local school board that just went from terrible to god awful. So they took out the guy that said we need to be on our knees praying for forgiveness over these trans students' rights protections, and replaced him with somebody who said, if it was me, I would have defied all of the Virginia school board's directives to issue trans student protections, and taken us to court over it. So we went from far right to just like, whoa, all the way out there.
So I want to go ahead. One of the things I read when I believe it was either maybe it was Baby Bush when he was in office, about how liberals have more nightmares and anxiety when a Republican is president, and vice versa is true. So I want to get into today's topic about embodiment, and about how, because a lot of this is visceral for us. We wake up, we can't sleep, how it lands in our bodies. And we're talking about embodiment with two amazing people. One of them, Reverend Erin J. Walter, is the acting executive director of the Texas Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry. She leads dance classes, fronts the band Parker Woodland, and is the affiliated community minister at Wildflower UU Church in Austin, Texas. And the Reverend Lindasusan Ulrich is the minister at the Unitarian Society of New Haven, Connecticut. Their ministry is rooted in radical welcome, deep collaboration, and joy. And we are proud that both of these folks led worship for the Church of Larger Fellowship. So welcome to the two of you. And we're going to talk about ways that when the world is on fire and we try to fight for liberation, and yet even white liberals who want to keep the status quo because they're truly maybe afraid of liberation, true liberation, how do we hold in our bodies, how do we work through this anxiety, this fear of what's happening around us? How do you both do this with your ministries? So let's start there. This is a great topic today. Whoever wants to start.
Thanks for having us. It's really good to be here. I came straight from a dance class, so I'm really in the mood for this topic, and I'm grateful to be invited. When I led worship for the CLF, I remember, so I did one Zumba style song in the worship, and somebody put in the chat, my preacher is working up a sweat or something. And I was like, yeah, man. I keep remembering when Texas, there's a lot about the filibuster right now and wanting to get rid of the filibuster in general, or change the filibuster. And I'm into that. And I remember in Texas when Wendy Davis was doing her filibuster quite a few years ago around abortion rights. And I had been in the Capitol over and over again with just, huge groups of Texans. It really felt like a people's moment. But there was one day when I really just needed to go to my dance class. And I remember wrestling with, like, do I go back to the Capitol again, or do I go to my dance class, YMCA, with my friends? And it wasn't actually that hard of a decision. I went to my dance class because we need those practices that nourish us. This is work of generations, right? We're part of a long continuum. And so for me, choosing to dance, to sing, to play rock and roll, like, is part of the nourishment to have the energy to show up all those other times. So that's what always comes up for me. And I'm in that spirit today coming from my class, and I give thanks for that.
And I think a lot.
Susan?
Yeah, so I want to add my thanks for having us as well. I'm really excited to be here. One of the things that I think of a lot is that the body is very, very wise, and it tells us things. And so when that, that anxiety, that fear, that despair sometimes comes up, what's the information that it's transmitting? Like, what can we learn from it? What can we, is it tightness in the chest? Is it nausea in the belly? Is it like some really weird quirk with your big toe? Like, where is it showing up? And then what is the particular message of it? And there's this great exercise that I learned where you can actually help your body re-regulate itself by putting your hand someplace that is relatively at peace, either at peace or more at peace than the rest of your body, and find what part of your body could really use some love. And then just going back and forth kind of between the two places to help, bring things back to a more even keel. So it's, I think that's a really great tool for activists who are really deep in, or anyone that, people of color, queer folks, folks with disabilities, anyone who is really, whose bodies are under attack just by waking up in the morning, we get to use our own resources to help ourselves. It's been a great tool for me, I know, over the years.
I'd be interested to know about any favorite body practices from folks here, but I want to echo that listening to your body. I always tell folks in my dance for body and spirit class, I like to holler out, listen to your body will tell you the truth, over the sounds of Pitbull and Shakira and such. It's one of my catchphrases, but I think that what's amazing and heartbreaking to me is how much we're taught societally, certainly me as a white woman, not to listen to my body, that my body won't tell me the truth, that I'm supposed to listen to all these other external messages. So whatever practices you choose, whatever it may be, meditation, yoga, walks, anything. My dog is currently begging for a walk, so that's on my mind. But to listen to your body, it's like easier said than done. And so I think to have some compassion with ourselves about that. I was just with some of my dance folks, and one of them has been suffering, all different kinds of body issues, and she's trying to talk to the doctors. The doctors are dismissing some of it. It's, so learning to trust yourself is not a small thing, I think, in our society. It's big work, and work that we can share with each other and encourage in each other.
Well, and for some of us with some bodies, especially, and there are many different kinds of bodies that fit in this category, there are whole institutions that tell us not to trust our bodies, right? So, I talk a lot with folks who are fat about the ways in which medical institutions dismiss what we know about our bodies, right? I have recently, I guess it's now 2 years ago, been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, but I've had pain for 15 years. And for 12 of those years, I would go to doctors and say, my hand hurts so much I can't hold a pencil. and they would go, well, you should lose some weight. And I would look at them and I'd go, okay, there's only so much skinnier my hand is going to get. And you're not listening to me at this point, right? I am listening to my body, which is saying, I hurt and I need I need care, and you are not listening to me, you the medical professional. And I know that for folks who deal with misogyny and transphobia in medical establishments, like there are whole institutions, right, that tell people not to listen to our bodies, and that they know better about our bodies than we do, which is tough.
All points to violent extractive capitalism, which is, what I always harp on, because there's a lot of money to be made in us not accepting ourselves in our bodies exactly the way they are.
That's right.
And one of the things I've been doing is I follow TikTok, or I'm on what a rabbit hole that is. I thought YouTube was bad, but there's a few folks I follow who offer strategies for anxiety. Like I suffered from anxiety most of my life since I was a child. And one of the things that I found weirdly powerful was taking something from the freezer, maybe like a bag of, I don't buy peas, but whatever, like even a ice pack, and wrapping it in a thin towel and putting it right in the middle of my chest for like 15 minutes. And it calms especially if I'm having like a severe anxiety attack for whatever reason. But, and that's been super helpful. And it really like brings me back into my body. And then there's like strategies of pinching like between your thumb and index finger or pointer. And there's different ways, and breathing. Like some folks will say, I just need to think about breathing, and then I get right back into my body. And loving and being in our bodies is an act of liberation, is an act of saying to the system that wants us to dislike every part of who we are and how we show up so we can buy things. Loving ourselves and being in our bodies is an act of liberation, is an act of resistance. That's the word I'm looking for. It's almost revolutionary what the Sonia Renee Taylor's book, The Body's Not an Apology. And I mean, there's been a lot of work on trauma, especially in the last, I would say 10 years, even though the book, The Body Keeps Score was written, and I'm forgetting now the author, I'm blanking on his name, who talks about trauma living in our bodies. I think that's one school of area that has thankfully been paid attention to. But in addition to that is how we embody living in this world, trans bodies, disabled bodies, we were saying, and differently abled bodies, and just embracing and loving who we are, how we are, is still so countercultural. And it feels like it shouldn't be in 2021, but it is. And so talking about how movement is, however we move, however we love ourselves exactly the way we are, is just such an important goal to have, because it still feels revolutionary and resistant.
I mean, part of it is that the story of the body being less than goes back so far. It's a story that's been getting told over and over and over and over. I mean, our colleague, Reverend Dr. Sophia Bettencourt, very wisely says that religion is really, really good at telling stories over time and maintaining stories. And unfortunately, that includes the crappy stories like, the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Like, shut up, please. No. Like the body.
It's about how to manipulate a mass of people.
Sure. I'm saying that given how long we've been taught that story, it's going to take a lot of storytelling over time to undo it. And we're starting to tell different stories about the body and its power and its loyalty and its worthwhileness. But we're up against capitalism and, scripture. So yeah, 2021.
Right?
Sadly, we haven't been fighting it that long in the scheme of things. But it also we have good means for, the same medium for getting out the destructive stories is also available for getting out stories of healing. And that's what I hope we're doing, at least some today. Well, I know we are, so there. Nah.
Definitely. Well, and it's amazing to me just to see people's faces light up, even when they're given permission. Like, all of us could wiggle right now. We're sitting so still mostly, in these squares. But who was it? I think it was Reverend Kim in New Jersey. Oh, I'm going to think of her church name in a minute. But, I've seen her invite people to just get even 1% more comfortable in worship over Zoom. And so I've been borrowing and adapting that and just sort of showing people, like, you could just wiggle in your seat right now if you could just get 1% more comfortable. And their faces, they just light up, And so I think what it takes to sit still when our bodies are meant to move, and in Unitarian Universalism especially, like, as many of our congregations are making moves back in person or are trying to figure out multi-platform or these different things, we have an opportunity to bring more movement and more freedom and more creativity in those spaces. I know we're juggling a lot, so like, my heart is with my parish ministry colleagues. I'm getting ready to help Wildflower return for the first time in person next Sunday, and it's a lot. But I'm trying to think about how can we move a little bit, even as we're trying to figure out the tech and everything, because people need it. And we've been in our homes, at least I have, my family and I, far more than usual in this last year and a half, and we've been in front of screens far more. So just it's on my heart and mind how to seize this moment for embodiment in Unitarian Universalist spaces in particular.
Well, I think I was just going to say super briefly that one of the things that we're doing is, or that I like to do during worship, is make sure that the time of silence is long enough so that people can kind of like settle in and like really, that depth of silence that happens when you let it go on for more than 25 seconds. I think there's something really powerful in that, and this is a yes and to the movement, yes, for sure. But it lets people settle and just all of the because sitting in front of a screen or in church, there's this kind of tenseness, and then it just, with time, we can relax and just right, breath. I remember that.
Well, I think that the invitation to movement is so crucial in our worship services and in our being with each other, to just normalize that invitation at the outset, halfway through, towards the end, again and again, normalizing the invitation to move, to sit, to stand, to lean, to lie on the floor if you need to sit, to stim, in particular, is so crucial. I that's part of my practice, and I've had so many people like immediately private message me, "Oh my God, this is the first time I've ever heard somebody invite me to stim in church. Like, what a relief. What, just that alone, if I had only come here for that would be enough."
Well,
and
I'm sorry.
And what that says to us is that we have so much more work to do, right? Because that alone can't be spiritually nourishing. We've got more to do.
I was just going to add, it also normalizes our children being in worship because their bodies move. And how many stories have we heard of, someone, an adult giving kids and families the stink eye for just being kids, for just moving because they're in bodies and they move. So I think the more that we invite adults into that practice, the more, well, first of all, the more relaxed they'll be in general, and that can only also be good for our kids.
Well, and what we're talking about is in that embodiment back to listening to and trusting your body, is that some people are going to need more stillness and some people are going to need more movement, and we're all going to be those different people at different times. And so like just inviting again to listen to your body and what its needs are in that moment. It's so powerful.
During parish ministry in person, we had a wiggle zone so that families knew, or whoever needed to wiggle, you know, this zone over here is going to be wiggling, they're going to be moving, it's going to, and if that's distracting to you, if that's not something that is spiritually nourishing for you, we gotcha, we understand. Don't sit here. You know, we can sit in the rest of the spot that we got, because this is a spot that you are going to be wiggled on, and that wiggling is welcome. And you know, we had activities and play mats and all of that kind of thing as well, so that everybody can come. It's that consent, right? It's that idea that people come into a space and consent to be in that space together for a purpose, and consent to be, you know, touched, not touched, all of that kind of thing, in a way that helps us on this spiritual journey. And that can't be all that complicated.
Well, I think I'm always the one that says, remember where our foundation is, because that matters so much. I blame it all on this guy, Channing, right? Who was so wrapped up in his own shame that he removed all of his spiritual experience from his body. This is why we have so much religion that happens from the neck up, right? Because this guy offered us what offered. He was ashamed of his body. He was ashamed of his desires. He was a sickly child. He didn't have a lot of friends. He grew up in a time when being gay was simply not okay. His way to deal with that was to live in a tool shed, sleeping on the bare ground with a blanket, trying to rid his body of these urges, while he led this bizarre ascetic life while working for wealthy families tutoring their children. Okay? He needed to get as far away from his body as he possibly could, and he is who we cite more than any other theologian in our intellectual stuff that we talk about. We always go back to Channing, and we go back to, you know, like the reason, and he's the one that's, and what we need to understand is Channing is the drywall. Right? Channing is like the 2x4s behind the drywall in the basement that have had black mold on them for a century, but we have not torn that out and looked at it and put light on it. And we just know that we sneeze, right? We just know that we don't feel well. We just know that we're afraid of our bodies. We just know that we seek this sort of, not even out of body, but just separate from our body experience in Unitarianism, right? In our Unitarian heritage, you know, how the foundational story of any institution matters, because it will flavor how that institution behaves for the rest of its existence. It's like cooking in cast iron. This is my little rant. Cooking in cast iron, however you season a cast iron pan, the first time you use it will flavor everything you cook in that pan for 100 years. Whatever your grandmother did to her cast iron pan 100 years ago is coming through in what you cook for dinner tonight. And so institutions and people are like that. And we need to, like, we're going to be perpetually frustrated if we try and say, we need to do body stuff, we need to do body stuff, we need to do body stuff, without peeling that back and exposing why we need to do body stuff. You know?
I may jump in. Far be it from me to defend Channing, but I think it goes way, I mean, this is about Puritanism. This is about John Locke going to Africa and talking about Black bodies as if they are animals. I mean, this is way beyond. I mean, I hear you, and you're not wrong. It's a, you know, in addition to, I would go, that cast iron skillet was started way
back.
before chanting was a product of the Puritans and
Yes.
sexuality and how to and religion. We're going way back to women's purity and
Augustine. That dude had issues.
I mean,
Augustine had more issues than Paul.
Yeah, I mean, so what we're talking about here is not centering the white experience. When we go back to talking about the BMI, which is made up in trash, when we talk about white standards of beauty right now, because in the Middle Ages, the kings and queens and monarchs were what? Were being fat meant you were rich and could afford food. And so this is just an arbitrary moving target, and has been. And yeah, I mean, sure, chanting is part of it, but I'm saying this goes back to the implications of how especially Black and brown bodies have been characterized, and what we hold up as the ideal, and the self, and now, thanks to violent extractive capitalism, it's, again, loathing our bodies and not loving our bodies and not being in our bodies is money making. It's $1 billion industry in many different industries. And so I think deconstructing the stories we've been told way back from the beginning, biblical, in the Quran, even the whole idea of covering and modesty, you know, and that it's a female body's responsibility to make sure a male doesn't look at her sexually, right? We tell women to what? Watch, we tell female identified folks to be the ones who are careful to somehow control male identified folks, or somehow keep from being attacked or assaulted. And that is a way we're in our bodies, that my body is always going to be under attack because I identify as a female. And so it's just, all I'm saying is, I would, again, I never thought I'd be in a position to defend Channing, but I don't think it's Channing. I think it's he's a product of Puritan Channing. Thank you, Dawn.
You know me, always glad to help.
The VUU history has been made today.
It's funny. I thought, following on what Chris was saying, I thought you were going to go somewhere totally different, because with the idea of consent, because for me, consent is so central to Unitarian Universalism. We have to opt in all the time. And it's very demanding if you're continuously making that affirmative choice. But to me, it's also one of the things I value most about Unitarian Universalism, is that I'm not here out of fear. I'm here out of commitment and a desire to live a more full and meaningful life. So yeah, I was going somewhere very different with the whole idea of consent. But you know, to me, it also ties into, if we practice consent as a faith community of opting in and making these affirmative choices and, you know, affirming covenant, that there's something that is inherently teaching our children too, about they have the right to opt in or opt out. They have the right to have agency over their lives. So it's all tied up, both in the body and in the spirit, all at the same time. For me, in Unitarian Universalism.
And I think that's one of the parts that is hard in faith formation, you know, particularly with children and youth, is understanding that consent is on a spectrum, right? It's on a spectrum in terms of culture, in terms of privilege, in terms of risk. And so what we can, you know, say somebody has consent over their lives as a young white male identified youth is different than a young brown male identified youth, right? Because the risk and the privilege that those folks are taking. So I think often of, you know, we've talked about this before, of OWL and our whole lives teaching, and there's a lot in there that is wonderful and and there's some that really misses the mark culturally. And so how do we bring both of those together to affirm consent and also recognize, you know, as I know as a parent of young brown men, there were things that they didn't have a choice about that their peers did. And that was me in my role keeping them safe, right? And so I think that it's so important to continue to, like you said, opt in to to that, and making sure that we're having families opt in and know that there's not one thing that's going to work for everyone, right? Why do we keep looking for that one thing that's going to work for everyone? Can we not understand? It would be so boring.
Yeah.
One of the, maybe this is too much optimism, but one of the things that I'm hoping will be a silver lining from the pandemic is greater consent language and more use of consent language, because we've had to ask, you know, we've had to communicate with folks, or hopefully many of us have, around what is your masking in your home? What about a hug right now? You know, as things have shifted, and, you know, we've gone back and forth between stage 2 and 5 here in Austin over the course of 2021. And so I'm hoping that we've gotten some good practice in that. I also wanted to say that in terms of welcoming in our congregations, in our worship, being more multiculturally welcoming, if folks haven't read Centering, Navigating Race, Authenticity, and Power in Ministry, there's great stuff in there. I've been going back to it recently and really loving Derek Jackson's first piece in regards to music and music in the Black church. As a musician myself, and somebody who really uses music, including rock and roll, in church, in a way that people are not always expecting, you know, that World's on Fire and We Still Fall in Love video that I use, it starts with go. A really loud go. And so what I've done is try to set expectations for people in the service about, you're going to hear a range of musical styles. Things might be at different volumes. Just, you know, we're doing what we can on this end. I invite you to control it for what's comfortable for you, but letting people know that we're choosing different kinds of music in this service to reach people's spirits in different ways. And so it's both consent and trying to be explicit. I know you like my dog's husky tail. Speaking of embodiment, here's another creature to model that for you. But anyway, just trying to kind of be explicit in my intention with what I'm bringing to the experience, and has seemed to help people connect to it and receive it, if in ways that maybe aren't as jarring as they would have been. Anyway, I'll let someone else talk, and I'll see how he's doing back there.
Erin, what you're normalizing there too is we're gonna have different ways of experiencing this, and not all of them are gonna work for you as an individual. But know that, like, that music is gonna work for somebody else that you are in relationship with.
Ding.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, you know, stillness is not going to work for everyone, and movement is not going to work for everyone, right? So,
but hopefully, on average, there's something that works for you, and
right.
over time, because that's the thing too. You know, religion, relinking. We keep coming back, ideally, and so it's not a one-time thing. It's not like this one service has to meet absolutely everyone's needs 100%, which is of course a setup for failure because it doesn't exist. But because we're covenantal communities, it's a relationship over time, and hopefully you get your needs met over time, even if a particular data point doesn't do much for you.
And before you send that email of how you didn't like how long silence went, dear beloved people of Unitarian Universalism, I know that the following week, or maybe the week after, this is about Unitarian Universalism and experiencing the expansiveness of what a beautiful faith we can have. So before you hit send, you can write it, but just put it in your notes or your drafts, and don't put it, and just, you know, let it be known to yourself how much you didn't like it. Because you know what, maybe in time, maybe you will like sitting in silence. Maybe you will like moving your arms, and maybe you won't, but it's not all about you.
Yes. Amen.
What?
Well,
This is why we get called blasphemers, you know.
Do we get called that? I get called other things, but yes, that's a good one.
I was teaching myself on Sunday. These words came out of me that had never come out of me before in the benediction with the congregation. I said, as I started it, I said, this is my favorite part of the service. This is the part of the service where you pause and you give thanks for what worked and reached you, and you like take it into your heart and your body to carry with you forever. And then this is also the part where you notice what didn't reach you, and you think about how you might offer something else someday, or who it might, you know. And I was just like, oh, I'm preaching to me right now, you know, because as a minister, it doesn't always work for me either. You know, it's not all for us all the time. So anyway, Michael, thank you for that, you know, piece, because yeah, I'm still preaching that to me too.
Well, I mean, how much more beautiful is it that I can to exercise, to go back to our embodiment metaphor, to exercise that muscle and strengthen that ability to be glad on someone else's behalf, just to be happy for them. That I could think it's the, like, holy crap, please don't play that song ever again because it made my ears bleed. But that person next to me is enraptured, and I can find joy in their rapture, even if I don't find joy in the thing. It's like when you ask someone to talk about something that they care about, you know, it's like you were saying, Erin, about people's faces just light up. It's magnificent. And so then I get that, you know, we have these lovely mirror neurons where their joy becomes my joy. What if we could do that all the time? Just take joy in each other's joy. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Like, help carry each other's burdens, help celebrate each other's joys. And
In that.
yeah, but you know, we're also not a, you know, as someone said to me recently, we're not a collection agency. We're not trying to, you know, practice it in spiritual community so that we can do it in the world, so that we can tell those different stories in the world about how to be human and how to live embodied lives and celebrate that.
Because
so
then the addition is, we can then, when we have communities in pain and are suffering, we will show up and not argue people's experiences.
And maybe, you know, maybe after, in addition to Aisha's, you know, put that email in the draft. When you're drafting that email, unless you can say 3 things that you liked about this service or previous services, don't write the email. Like, you gotta look at the things that did land and were meaningful, and that you did take something away, because then you're gonna be like, you know what? Yeah, that's right. There was that song that I just didn't, but I was really grooving last week. So.
Or the other part of it too is looking at, well, why did I react so strongly to this thing that I don't like? You know, my beloved mentor, Gail Geisenhainer, also often talks about the absolute value of someone's energy about something, because they're, you know, whether you love something or hate something, there's clearly energy to it. So what's that energy telling you? As opposed to someone who's indifferent about it, that's got a lot less energy. So what, you know, why did it get under my skin? What is going on there? Again, the body gives you wisdom if you pay attention to it. I feel strongly about this stuff. You might have picked up on that.
I do too. Well, and what amazes me still, I just keep going back to this, and just want to invite us all and anybody listening to ask their body as many questions, you know, listen, like we were saying. I've been blown away by how often we truly don't know, or folks might not know what's informing what they think, or what they believe, or what they're holding that's causing a reaction, what I'm holding that's causing a reaction. I used to think that when my loved ones, when I would say what's wrong, and they would say nothing, I used to think they were like deliberately withholding for me or lying to me. And I realized in time, oh no, this person I was asking didn't know what was wrong or couldn't name what was wrong. And there are times when I haven't been able to name what's wrong until I sit with it, until I pause, I slow down, I listen. And it really is a spiritual practice, especially for Unitarian Universalists who are trying to seek being part of beloved community, being part of liberation. Like, where are reactions coming from when we react to these things in the world, in worship, when we want to argue with people about their lived experience rather than be grateful to have had it shared with us or to be present to it? Where are those reactions coming from? So again, like just going back to the body and seeing what it has to tell us.
What you're saying about liberation is really important, because once we can do that practice of looking, we become the main recipients of liberation, which then frees us to help liberate others. Having done somatic therapy for years, I cannot tell you the amount of time that I had been spending dissociated from my body versus afterwards, the amount of time that I was present in my body. It was a complete flip-flop. It was revolutionary. And my life is completely different because I was paying attention to my body and able to garner those signals and that wisdom that was available when I knew how, when I could slow down and come back and feel safe there.
And just a shout out for, the privilege that we're talking about to be able to do that, and the recognition of that, a lot of what we've talked about today, it presupposes a privilege of having the time, energy, resources to be able to take, and we know that that's not always the case, and so that's part of looking at what our neighbor doesn't have that we do, to make sure that everybody is getting what they need.
Amen, Chris. And I think one of the things I have some amount of compassion for the, going full circle to what we started talking about, what happened in the Virginia race, and where the folks who are wanting to continue the status quo of oppression are brilliant is they're feeding people's fear. And then people don't even know why they're voting against critical race theory. People have been asked, like, what is it? Well, I don't know. I just know I don't like it. Because if you're feeding fear, you're keeping the anxiety high, and people don't know. And I'm going to go back to James Baldwin, who said, white people are not connected to themselves. So if you're not connected to yourself and all that's happening is fear, and your body just knows this thing I'm afraid of, whether or not it's real, then we stay disconnected. And as a society, we're going to shit. But I want to leave on a hopeful note. Let's not end with the dumpster fire that is the United States of America right now. Let's end with the hope and the recognition that as Unitarian Universalists, we are doing our very best to recognize our privilege and to invite people to be connected to themselves. Embodiment. Those of you who have not attended a Church of Larger Fellowship worship, please do on Sunday evenings. Well, evening U.S. time, and then we replay worship. Tanner has all this information, so please come to our website. And Tanner, anyone else have a last word? We have about 2 minutes left. Please jump in. This has been an amazing show.
Well, if anybody wants to dance with me, I do Zoom dance for spiritual practice, Zumba style, but kind of my own UU version. I choose the music for the spirit of it all on Fridays at 10 a.m. Central. You can drop me a line on my website on erinjwalter.com and I'll get you connected. I don't put the link out publicly because of like Zoom bombing type stuff. We don't want that, but I would love to dance with you wherever you are out there. And just thank you all
whatever kind of body you're going to be dancing with.
100%.
That's right. You're
that's what I want, and I am, and that's Yeah, we could. That's a whole. I could do a whole other hour on that. I want all the bodies, all the different kinds of dancing. Thank you, Michael.
And I'll just close by saying that everything that we do is mitigated by the body. We cannot separate it. It's a false tearing apart of who we are as human beings. It can be convenient to talk about mind, spirit, intellect, emotions, but that's just the model. It's when we start taking the model for reality that things go really bonkers. And yeah, everything is mitigated by the body. So let's be kind. Let's be kind to our bodies.
Amen. Yeah, this is anyone else want to say anything? And before we close out our amazing embodied show, and it feels like we need to. Should we take a breath together?
Yeah.
Should we?
Yes.
Breath. Thank you all so much. This has been amazing. Happy to be with all of you. We will see you next week on another episode of The VUU, and happy Diwali, happy Festival of Lights, and we will see you next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The VUU.